Right now, in your pocket sits a device more powerful than the computers that sent humans to the moon. It's a remarkable story. You touch it hundreds of times a day, yet have you ever wondered how we got here on this incredible journey? To understand the telephone, we need to go back to a time before electricity lit our homes, before voices could travel through wires. The world then communicated through letters, messengers, and telegraphs, sending only coded clicks and beeps across great distances. But in the mid-1800s, something was changing as scientists began understanding sound itself and how air vibrations worked. These captured vibrations could be transformed and transmitted, marking the beginning of a revolution that would shrink our world. The story really begins with Alexander Graham Bell, a teacher of the deaf in Boston, who wasn't alone in this race. Bell was fascinated by how sound waves worked and how the human ear translated vibrations into meaning, leading to voice communication. Bell had fierce competition. Elisha Gray worked on similar ideas, and their race came down to a matter of hours. First, we need to understand what problem they were solving and why it mattered so desperately to humanity. Imagine living in 1870s America. To send a message across town, you'd write a letter and wait for delivery. To contact someone in another city, you'd use the telegraph. You couldn't hear their voice, emotion, or urgency. Business deals took weeks to negotiate, and family news traveled slowly, losing precious time in emergencies. The world desperately needed a way to transmit the human voice itself, not just coded symbols, consuming Bell's imagination. Bell's approach was elegant in its simplicity. He understood sound waves cause physical vibrations. These vibrations could potentially be converted into electrical signals, which then could travel through a wire to another location. At the receiving end, electrical signals would convert back into vibrations, recreating the original sound. This was revolutionary thinking in 1875, as nobody had successfully transmitted complex sounds like human speech. Working in a cramped Boston workshop with assistant Thomas Watson, Bell experimented endlessly for months. They tested materials for diaphragms, various liquids, and mechanisms. Progress was maddeningly slow, filled with failures. Then came March 10th, 1876, a date that would change human communication forever for all time. Bell, frustrated from spilling battery acid, called out to his assistant, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." But Watson heard those words through the experimental device, transmitted electrically from the next room. Those 8 words proved the human voice could travel through wires, and the telephone was finally born. What makes this story fascinating? Bell filed his patent just hours before Elisha Gray filed a similar design. The patent office received both applications on February 14th, 1876. This timing sparked legal battles lasting years. Some historians still debate who truly invented the telephone first. Was it Bell or Gray? What about Antonio Musi, who demonstrated a device earlier, or Johann Philipp Reis, who built a primitive phone? Great inventions rarely have a single inventor. They emerge when the time is right and society needs solutions. Multiple brilliant minds were circling the same idea, each contributing pieces to the puzzle we now call the telephone. Bell got the patent and made the invention work, reliably demonstrating it at the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition. Emperor Dom Pedro II of Brazil famously exclaimed in amazement upon hearing speech through the device. The world was paying attention now. Still, the early telephone was primitive. You had to shout, and the voice sounded tinny and distant. Its range was limited to just a few miles. Many saw it as a novelty, a toy for the wealthy. Bell wasn't sure what to do with his invention, offering to sell the patent to Western Union. Western Union turned him down for $100,000, calling the telephone hardly more than a toy. Something remarkable began to happen as Bell and others improved the technology. People saw its potential. The first commercial line connected a banker's office to home. Business could be conducted instantly. By 1878, the first telephone exchange opened in New Haven, Connecticut, allowing multiple people to connect. This was the birth of the telephone network, the beginning of our interconnected world, with exchanges in most major cities. The growth was explosive and chaotic, with telephone companies stringing wires across cities in tangled webs. In some places, the sky became dark with telephone lines looking like a massive spider's web overhead. The story gets complicated because the telephone created new problems even as it solved old ones. How do you connect everyone, operate the network, and call from New York to San Francisco effectively? Enter the telephone operator, mostly young women who became the human switchboard, diligently connecting calls. You'd pick up the phone, an operator would answer, and physically connect your line with plugs and cables. These operators became incredibly skilled, memorizing thousands of voices and numbers, knowing everyone's business. They were also first responders in emergencies, connecting doctors to patients and fire departments to blazing buildings. Meanwhile, inventors raced to improve the telephone. Early models required separate pieces for speaking and listening. Thomas Edison developed a better transmitter using carbon granules, improving sound quality dramatically and setting a standard. Long distance calling was the next frontier, but it presented enormous technical challenges to engineers. Electrical signals weaken over hundreds of miles, the voice would fade to nothing, and a solution wasn't obvious. The breakthrough came with the vacuum tube amplifier in 1906 by Lee DeForest, boosting signals clearly. In 1915, the first transcontinental call connected New York to San Francisco, recreating their historic conversation. The world was shrinking, but the telephone was still bound by wires, with every connection requiring a physical cable. Laying undersea cables across oceans was expensive and challenging. Global communication remained difficult to achieve. Then radio technology emerged, and visionaries imagined wireless telephones carrying voices through the air. The technology existed in pieces, but creating a practical, portable form would take decades of innovation. By the mid-1900s, the telephone became ubiquitous. Families had phones in homes, businesses relied on them. Public phone booths stood on street corners everywhere. Yet this was still just the beginning of the story. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. By the 1960s, engineers faced a profound challenge. How could they free the telephone from its wire, from that copper tether that defined voice communication for nearly a century? The dream of wireless communication wasn't new. Radio had proven voices could travel through air, creating a truly portable telephone for everyday people required solving problems that seemed to defy the technology. The obstacles were staggering. Radio frequencies needed dividing, but there weren't enough channels for millions. Batteries were heavy and drained quickly, and handing off a moving caller without dropping the call was challenging. Engineers at Bell Labs wrestled with these questions, developing the concept of cellular networks throughout the decades. Dividing cities into small zones called cells, each served by its own transmitter, allowed calls to transfer like a relay race. Meanwhile, a parallel revolution was happening in miniaturization. Transistors replaced vacuum tubes, making electronics efficient. Integrated circuits packed thousands of components onto fingernail-sized chips, making the impossible slowly become possible. Then came April 3, 1973. Martin Cooper, a Motorola engineer, stood on a New York City sidewalk. He held a device weighing nearly 2 pounds and made the first public call, dialing his rival at Bell Labs. Imagine that moment. Cooper walking down 6th Avenue, speaking into a brick-sized device, passers-by staring in disbelief. The call quality was poor, battery lasted 20 minutes, and cost was equivalent to $11,000 today. This breakthrough created a new problem. The technology existed, but it wasn't practical yet. The Motorola Dyna TAC wouldn't reach consumers for a decade. Infrastructure for millions of calls didn't exist. Cities needed to be blanketed with cell towers, frequency spectrum allocated, and standards established effectively. Phones needed to become smaller, lighter, cheaper, and more reliable before ordinary people embraced them. Throughout the 1980s, engineers worked obsessively to overcome barriers and build out networks. Japan launched the first cellular network in 1979, Scandinavian countries and America followed, taking shape. Meanwhile, phones evolved rapidly, Each generation became smaller and more capable for users. The Motorola Dyna-TAC went on sale in 1983 for nearly $4,000, and early adopters couldn't get enough. Even as mobile phones spread, skeptics questioned if they'd ever become mainstream for ordinary people. Weren't mobile phones just expensive toys for wealthy executives? The cultural shift was as challenging as the technological. Then something unexpected happened. As networks expanded and prices dropped, mobile phones replaced landlines. Mobile networks leapfrogged traditional systems, connecting millions who never had access, with staggering, transformative implications. By the 1990s, mobile phones became smaller, lighter, and increasingly affordable for everyone. Texting emerged as an unexpected phenomenon, a feature engineers barely considered, but users embraced creatively. Even as mobile phones conquered the world, another revolution was brewing, challenging assumptions. Engineers asked a provocative question: what if the phone could do more than voice and text, becoming a computer? Early attempts were clumsy. Personal digital assistants offered computing features but couldn't make calls. Some phones added email and web browsing, but interfaces were frustrating and screens were tiny. BlackBerry, launched in the early 2000s, proved mobile email worked beautifully for business users. Companies experimented with cameras, music players, and touchscreens, but nobody had combined all elements coherently. The tension built throughout the early 2000s, technology advanced, making a true pocket computer possible. Every smartphone felt like a compromise, powerful yet limited. Something essential was still clearly missing. Then, January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a San Francisco stage holding a revolutionary device. No physical keyboard, just a large glass touchscreen. He called it an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. The original iPhone wasn't perfect, lacking basic features like an app store and third-party software. Yet its design, interface, and coherent vision made limitations temporary. This was clearly the future. Within months, competitors scrambled to respond. Google accelerated Android, and Microsoft adapted Windows. BlackBerry and Nokia, market leaders, faced an existential threat. The smartphone era transformed industries overnight. The truly revolutionary moment came a year later when Apple opened the App Store. Suddenly, anyone could create software for these pocket computers, building games, tools, and social networks. Within a decade, smartphones became more powerful than computers that sent astronauts to the moon. They contain GPS, cameras, sensors, and powerful processors. We use them to navigate, shop, bank, and create. Today's phones represent an incomprehensible leap from Alexander Graham Bell's first device. Modern smartphones digitize, compress, encrypt, beam wirelessly, and reconstruct voice perfectly in milliseconds with clarity. The evolution isn't finished. Engineers are already developing the next generation with advanced technology. Foldable screens, AI assistants, augmented reality, and wearable integration mean the telephone story continues unfolding every day. What makes this story remarkable is the telephone didn't just evolve through technology alone. Every breakthrough came because someone listened. Bell heard the desire to speak across distance, connecting humanity. Martin Cooper saw business people trapped at desks and imagined freedom. Steve Jobs gave us touch. Each generation of telephone makers solved real human problems, one conversation at a time, for connection. That's the deeper lesson in this 150-year journey. Innovation isn't about the technology itself. It's about understanding what connects us, what we yearn for. The telephone answered humanity's oldest need, the need to be heard, to share a moment, to tell someone far away that you're thinking of them. From that first scratchy voice to a grandmother video calling her grandchild, the core purpose never changed. Today, billions of us carry devices that would seem like magic to Alexander Graham Bell. We use them for the same reason he invented his device: connection, communication, and closing the distance between hearts. Next time you pick up your phone, remember you're holding more than glass and silicon. You are holding the culmination of countless dreams and humanity's refusal to accept silence, a conversation still ongoing. The telephone's story isn't finished. It's evolving right now, in your pocket, waiting for brave minds. It waits for the next person brave enough to imagine what connection could mean tomorrow, and that person might just be you.